Hello, hello, hello. Welcome into everybody to episode 26 of Beyond the Beat, also known as The Experiment. Today we're going to be covering two stories. The Atlantic's Charlie Warzel takes a big swing at crypto's final legacy. And Baird talks about a BIP, one Bitcoin equals one Satoshi. Or does it? Stay tuned. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Beats. This time, in case you think your eyes are deceiving you, you're correct. I am alone. I thought in the spirit of Christmas, and for you that are pagans, in the spirit of whatever pagans celebrate, I continue to experiment with this new pivot that I'm doing. And so I thought I'd switch it up a little bit, see how I went just ranting away at the news and the things that I find interesting and not interesting, what makes sense, what doesn't. So here I am completely on my own. I apologize for my behavior ahead of time and for we'll see how this news analysis goes today. I asked around because, before we carry on, subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like, notifications, comment, even if you think this is hot garbage or the best podcast of your entire life because you love my hats and you love pigs. But yeah, that would go a long way. The algorithm will appreciate it, which means I'll appreciate it, or vice versa. I'll appreciate it and the algorithm will appreciate it. So yeah, take a second and log in and do all that sort of stuff so that you can actually watch this, or you can actually subscribe and help me out. I'm coming with a couple news stories that I thought was pretty interesting from the Bitcoin space. I'm going to touch on the ones because I put a call out and I'm going to pull that call out now. If you want me to review any news stories, analyze them, see what I think, talk about them with my guests, then drop them in the comments. Drop a link. And then if you want to give me a little blurb why you think this was interesting or why not, why you think he was an absolute piece of shit and that you couldn't understand how this got through maybe a line or two of editors and it got published and now it's on the internet forever. That's also interesting and I'll be happy to dive into that because I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of pieces like that. So the first one is Bitcoin related. Well, they're both Bitcoin related, to be fair. But the first one is actually a push for social aspects, changes in the Bitcoin space. So ossifiers, Bitcoin maxis, the one that wants to leave everything alone always, sit down and get ready to squirm. But yeah, this is from my weekend editor, Baird. Kyle, I hope Baird is how you pronounce your surname. If not, I'm not going to dox myself, so you can't come after me. So best of luck with that. But yeah, it's titled One Bitcoin Equals One Satoshi. Proposal looks to ditch the crypto's decimal points. A proposal wants to remove the decimal places from Bitcoin, and critics warn a unit change may confuse users and increase errors. So I thought this was pretty interesting because, for one, it's not necessarily a big change, but it's interesting because it's not necessarily a change to the code base, but rather to like the social aspect of how we relate to Bitcoin, how we communicate Bitcoin, how we think about it from a monetary perspective. So in that sense, I thought it was pretty interesting. And it was obviously super controversial with a bunch of different tweets and a bunch of people calling it, some pretty insulting things to the author, who actually I think is pretty thick-skinned. So I've seen him, take a couple on the chin in the Bitcoin space, but he doesn't hold back. But anyways, I'll get to the news now. Here we go. Bitcoin advocate John Carvalho introduced a new Bitcoin improvement proposal that seeks to redefine the cryptocurrency's unit of measurement. The proposal suggests replacing the structure where one Bitcoin equals 100 million Satoshis with a system that makes the smallest indivisible unit the Satoshi. Under Carvalho's proposal, 1 Bitcoin would now mean what is currently understood as 1 Satoshi, so 1/100th millionth of a Bitcoin. So that's fucking hard to say. And no wonder people struggle to explain Bitcoin when when 1 Bitcoin is composed of 100 million pieces. Now, you can say only idiots get confused by it, but the world is populated by a fair amount of idiots. One of them is speaking to you right now, which actually makes you a bit of an idiot because you're listening to me. So there's that. But yeah, this is something that I've run across. I've been covering Bitcoin for the past 6 years, and I've been doing classes, both in schools and foundations and things like that. And so it's always been a bit of an odd one to say Bitcoin is divided by 100 million people. And here's the twist. And each individual piece is called a Satoshi. So for those of you that are listening that don't know, Satoshi Nakamoto is the anonymous creator of Bitcoin. And yes, he didn't make it up that it was supposed to be named after him, but each decimal point is named after him. So under Carvalho's proposal, this change would eliminate the need for decimal places presenting Bitcoin values and hold integers, which means numbers, I'm going to suppose. For example, what is now shown as 0.00010000, I hope I said enough zeros, BTC would be displayed as 10,000 Bitcoins. Carvalho argues this redefinition would reduce confusion. I'm pretty fucking confused. Align Bitcoin's display with its integral protocol, continue to be confused, and make the currency easier to understand for unfamiliar users and familiar users. The decimal point is merely a human-imposed abstraction, the proposal states. I agree. Nevertheless, I find it bizarre that you would want to change the unit for the same, like a fraction of a unit for the same word as the total unit. Like if I were to say somebody, I want to pay you 10,000 Bitcoins, but that 1 full Bitcoin is 100 million Bitcoins, that sounds pretty weird. And so I'm not entirely sure I'm on board with this idea. Not saying that Satoshis or Sats for short is a much better way, like we're going to see just now, but like to call the unit, the fraction of a unit, the same as the full unit just sounds weird and doesn't make much sense to me. But that's just me. And I mean, what's interesting about this as well is the idea of like a Bitcoin improvement proposal. So a BIP. So for people that are also listening and don't know what a BIP is, the Bitcoin community is run by people that developers, user bases, miners that propose changes to the software. It's a convoluted and a complex and a complicated and a conundrum-filled process that takes years for different implementations to go through or different proposals to go through. The majority are code-based. That's because of this tension of Bitcoin wanting to stay the same and not changing and being just what it is now. And that's what I found interesting about this one, actually, which is this is a proposal to change something on the social layer. So you're not changing anything necessarily to the protocol itself. You're changing how the humans that surround themselves around this network and that interact with it change it. So I thought that's a fair point. But so there's a subpoint or a subsegment, the bits debate. This is not the first time the community has debated changes to Bitcoin's unit structure. In 2017, Jimmy Song proposed BIP 176, which introduced bits as a standard denomination. Song's proposal aimed to simplify small transactions by moving away from confusing fractional BTC displays. This is all part of a long-standing debate on concerns about accessibility and user error in Bitcoin transactions. Critics of both ideas caution that shifting the unit structure could confuse users, increase the risk of mistakes in transactions, and create logistical challenges for wallets and exchanges already built around the current system. I agree to a degree about this. I lay in the camp that we have to be changing these sort of things. We have to, or at least talking about them and at least, playing around with the ideas in our mind of how things can be different and what can actually happen, and how we can, communicate the different features or characteristics of the Bitcoin protocol to people. Changing one Bitcoin to one Satoshi, or one Satoshi to one Bitcoin, for me, it doesn't make sense. I would personally, if I had a vote, which I technically don't, I would keep it as it is. I wouldn't necessarily change it unless something it's not that I'd keep it as it is. I just think that the idea of changing it to one Bitcoin doesn't make any sense. But that's just me. And let me know in the comments below what you think about this idea. I still think it's good, and it's a succinct article. The BIP itself. So the Twitter post that John Carvalho put out, I'll drop it in somewhere in this video. It's well worth a read. It's interesting. It gives you a sense of how the Bitcoin community talks about changes, proposes changes, and how the whole process to make things advance or stall or delay or go forward, backwards, left, right, or center sort of advance. So in that sense, I think it's a very interesting, just general mindset or idea or thought process that happens. Welcome into the second half of Beyond the Beat, episode 26, The Experiment. Testing new stuff out, trying new things. Who knows how that's going to go? Remember, if you love it, if you hate it, if you don't really care, leave a comment. At least that way I'll know that somebody's listening. Actually, the second part so for those of you that are probably thinking to yourself, why am I going to leave a comment? He's probably not going to read it. Why am I going to DM him or respond to his Twitter request for articles and stories and ideas? This next piece was actually a recommendation from Emma at Yap Global. So shout out to Emma. Thank you so much for reminding me of this piece, because I had read this last week and it had sort of, jumped on the back burner. So I forgot, people are human. We forget sometimes. That's just how things go. It's a fragile memory, which is why passphrases on Bitcoin private keys is a dicey idea. But that's a story for another age, or whatever that saying goes. This is actually a piece by Charlie Warzel from The Atlantic. So for those of you that don't know, Charlie Warzel used to write Galaxy Brain, he's a tech writer, sort of the intersection, I suppose, of tech and culture. I've been was reading his stuff for years, and for reasons that are beyond me right now, I sort of got off-put by him. I don't remember exactly why, or maybe just he fell out of my life, as sometimes writers and people do. But here he is back again. And sorry, not sorry to all you Bitcoin maxis, the Ayn Rand lovers, the conservative right-wing libertarians who look at The Atlantic and squirm and squelch and feel the wokeism coming out of the inks and pages and things like that. But I still like to read it. And I think it's interesting, and they put out good stuff. And whether or not this is actually a good piece, I'm going to leave it up to you. But nevertheless, I'm going to read it and give you my thoughts. Initial thoughts, and this is something that irks me a lot, is blocks of text. So I'm not a big fan of looking at an article and running into this massive block of text. The reality of the story is, on the internet, you have to make it easier for people to be able to read your stuff. You guys all know that I love books, so the actual process of sitting down and reading something isn't necessarily an issue. But if I run across this, for example, that's all I'm going to say about that. Anyways, the title of the piece is Crypto's Legacy is Finally Clear, an Anti-Establishment Technology for an Anti-Establishment Age by Charlie Warzel. For years, crypto skeptics have asked, what is this for? And for years, boosters have struggled to offer up a satisfactory answer. They argue that blockchain, the The technology upon which cryptocurrencies and other such applications are built is itself a genius technological invention, an elegant mechanism for documenting ownership online and fostering digital community. Blockchain for buddies or buddies for blockchain. Let's hug it all out on the distributed ledger technology. Or they say that it is foundation on which to build and fund a third hyper-financialized iteration of the internet, where you don't need human intermediaries to buy a carton image of an ape for 3.4 million. Justin Sun bought, or no, not Justin Sun, sorry. I was thinking of the banana that they bought, but I suppose this is talking about Bored Apes. I start to sense the cynicism and the skepticism in Charlie's words right now. Whether or not you don't like people buying cartoon images for 3.4 million and find it an absolute ludicrous and idiotic idea, the fact that people can do it exists and happens, so that's reality. I know I didn't really say much there. I'll leave those opinions for later. Then there are the currencies themselves, Bitcoin and Ether, and the endless series of meme coins and startup tokens. These are largely volatile, speculative assets that some people trade, shitpost about, use to store value, and sometimes get incredibly rich or go bankrupt from. The majority is probably going bankrupt. They're also infamously used to launder money, FUD attack, fund startups, and concoct elaborate financial fraud. Crypto has its use cases, but the knock has long been that the technology is overly complicated and offers nothing that the modern financial system can't already do. That crypto is a technological solution in search of a problem, at least for people who don't want to use it to commit crimes. So this is riddled with mistakes. For starters, and this is something that Alex Gladstein has been talking about for years, which is check your financial privilege. If you have access, and this is a story about myself. I'm Chilean, but I lived for like 7 and something years outside of Chile. And when I got back, the banks didn't want to give me the entire breadth of financial products. So for years, I was subbanked. We didn't call it subbanked. And I was a national and went to university. I had some savings. Like, there shouldn't have been any issues. So imagine that happened to me, right? In a country that is highly financialized, where I have proper ID, where I have a university degree, where I have savings, where I speak English like a fucking Yank. And yet I'm still subbanked. Imagine for the people that live in places without any sort of institutions, without any sort of anything, no college degrees, maybe the inability to read or write, all that sort of stuff. For them, Bitcoin does have a use case. To be oblivious to the reality that Bitcoin might be able to help bank the unbanked, whether that's happening or not, is a different story. Whether there's crimes and frauds and committances happening all around it, that's another thing. But the fact is, Bitcoin is an option. Crypto is an option. It exists there, and it exists for the people that might not have access to a bank account, that might not have access to a proper ID. The World Bank leaves unidentified people at 1.1 billion, something like that. And so to forget about them and to think about, if it offers nothing that the modern financial system can already do, what about access? Tiny detail. Just a minute, we can overlook that, to be honest, and keep on going on. But yeah, you can already start to see the holes in some of his arguments. I tend to agree, he says. I've spent time reporting on NFTs and crypto token-based decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, like the one that tried to buy an original printing of the Constitution in 2021. I've read opaque white papers for Web3 startups and decentralized finance protocols that use smart contracts to enable financial service transactions without major banks, but I've never found a killer app. Probably because you're American, you have access to the entire plethora of banking and financial services out there. You probably have access to Robinhood. You might be an accredited investor. You live in the country with the reserve currency. Maybe we should overlook that. The aftermath of the presidential election, however, has left me thinking about crypto's influence differently. I'm intrigued by the differently, just because of what he said until now. Crypto is a technology whose transformative product is not a particular service, but a culture, one that is, by nature, distrustful of institutions and sympathetic to people who want to dismantle or troll them. The election results were, at least in parts, a repudiation of institutional authorities, the federal government, our public health apparatus, the media, and crypto helped deliver them. The industry formed a super PAC that raised more than $200 million to support crypto-friendly politicians. This group, Fair Shake, was nonpartisan and supported both Democrats and Republicans. But it was Donald Trump who went all in on the technology. During his campaign, he promoted World Liberty Financial, a new crypto startup platform for decentralized finance, and offered assurances that he would fire SEC Chair Gary Gensler, who is known for cracking down on the crypto industry. Gensler will resign in January, as is typical when new administrations take over, he points out. Trump also pledged deregulation to help ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world. During his campaign, he said, if you're in favor of crypto, you better vote for Trump. At least in the short term, crypto's legacy seems to be that it has built a durable culture of true believers, techno-utopians, grifters, criminals, dupes, investors, and pandering politicians. Investments in this technology have enriched many of these people who have then used that money to try to create a world in their image. I mean, don't we all try and create a world in our image? He's a writer, he's a journalist, he tells stories, he's biased. He's trying to create a world in his image. Whether he's doing it through money or not, it's a different story. Though the white paper that introduced Bitcoin's origins and philosophy, something of a nerd text for crypto overall, does not discuss politics per se, cryptocurrency was quickly adopted and championed by cyber libertarians. Their core belief, dating back to the 1996 Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, is simply that government should not regulate the internet. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are built on blockchains, which are fundamentally anti-establishment insofar as they are decentralized. They do not require central authority or middleman to function. That's largely true, although the vast majority of blockchains aren't decentralized. In fact, I'd recommend Andreas Antonopoulos' short 2-minute video that talks about RIPCORD. So RIPCORD is the thing that you pull when you're falling out of an airplane connected to a parachute, and it saves your life essentially. And each one is an acronym. So R, I think, is revolutionary or censorship resistant. Then immutable, open, public, decentralized. So it has to have all those elements, and then it's worthwhile. So as the late David Golumbia, professor who studied digital culture, wrote in his 2016 book, The Politics of Bitcoin Software as Right-Wing Extremism, many of Bitcoin's most vociferous advocates rely on characterizations of the Federal Reserve as a corrupt idea in and of itself, a device run by conspiratorial bankers who want the state to control everyone's lives. For true believers at the time, cryptocurrencies were a techno-utopian response to a broken, exclusionary, and extractive financial system, a response that may either remake the system or burn it down. Can you remake the system? Question. Big question. Yet today, crypto's culture is far more diffuse. Exchanges such as Coinbase and Robinhood have effectively opened trading markets to anyone with a bank account and a smartphone. There are certainly true believers in the technology, but they are accompanied by celebrities and meme lords drumming on new coins based on viral memes and scores of day traders hoping to catch one of these speculation tokens at the right moment. Because crypto profits are driven by generating hype and marketing, the technology has spawned a durable digital culture of people longing for community or chasing after the allure of 1000x returns, as well as those who relish just how much crypto pisses off the right people. You've got to admit, Charlie Warzel is a brilliant writer. Like the way he tells things, the words that he's using, and just how he builds up sentences and just like portrays his ideas, because you can see why I was a fan. Even as crypto becomes more mainstream, many of the industry's boosters see their investments as community as a countercultural force. And so it makes sense that right-leaning culture warriors such as Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan, who are now very much the establishment but position themselves as outsiders, have expressed fondness for crypto. And that venture capitalists such as our last week friend Mark Andreessen, whose firm is deeply invested in crypto, have adopted more and more reactionary politics. Now, this is when I get annoyed because he's not being unbiased. Like, sure, Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan, like, technically like Bitcoin or technically are okay with crypto, but unless they're not the spokesperson for Bitcoin or crypto, they're just two people who are really famous who like it. Like, there's no point. Why are you saying... This is something that gets annoying. This is when, like, I understand the people that fight back or push back against things like the Atlantic that are just, and to be honest, on the other side as well, it's the same thing, but they just like push so bluntly their position. And it's just like, I mean, they're just two really famous people that talk about different things and they like Bitcoin. And something that like John Rice said last week, the technology is agnostic to the politics of the people that use it. Like, Bitcoin isn't necessarily libertarian. Bitcoin isn't necessarily communist. Ethereum isn't socialist because Vitalik Buterin is socialist and believes in public goods. Like, the technology is what it is. How you use it, the way you use it, that's what, at the end of the day, can matter. So, like... to politics, numbers, like, yeah, politics doesn't matter to numbers. So, I mean, yeah. It's easy to make fun of the crypto hype cycles. Look at who's doing it. The Beanie Babies-esque rise and fall of NFTs such as Bored Apes, and to roll your eyes at the shamelessness of meme coin culture. As of this righty, Haley Welch, a viral sensation turned podcaster better known as the Hawk Tour Girl, is in the middle of a backlash for launching her own meme coin, which immediately spiked and then crashed, infuriating her fans. If that sentence makes perfect sense to you, I'd like to apologize, but also, you get my drift, or my grift. Crypto culture, with its terminally online slang and imagery, is alienating and off-putting. The industry's penchant for Ponzi schemes and defrauding retail investors, the implosion of insolvent companies such as FTX and platforms such as Celsius, is more than worthy of scorn. And yet, through all of this, perhaps because of all of this, cryptocurrencies have minted a generation of millionaires, billionaires, and corporate war chests. And now they're using their money to influence politics. Big crypto is what I call it in this case. Which brings us back to Trump. Whether he understands crypto beyond the basic notion that's a good way to win votes and get rich off the back of his most fanatical supporters is not clear. But the alliance between Trump and the crypto constituency makes sense philosophically. Trump is corrupt and he loves money. For supporters, the appeal of his administration revolves in part around his promises to gut the federal government, seek retribution against his political enemies, and remake American institutions. To be fair, American institutions kind of need to be remade. Like, if you look at the U.S., maybe Trump, like the way that Trump is going to do it isn't necessarily the way it should be done. But to deny the fact that you need to remake American institutions just because the person who's going to lead that effort is not what you ultimately need makes no sense. You can see how the MAGA plan might overlap with an edgelordian culture that has contempt for a system it sees as decrepit and untrustworthy. The same overlap applies to technology executives like David Sachs, the anti-woke venture capitalist Trump has named as his AI and crypto czar. This is where things get interesting. Well, we'll see. I put all of this to Molly White, a researcher who covers the crypto industry. It's important to know that for those of you never heard of Molly White, she's a fierce crypto critic. So the fact that he put it to her, fierce crypto critic, a research, and then just calls her a researcher that covers the cryptocurrency industry, is, a bit of pretty weak journalism, because unless further down, and I forget, he talks about how much she criticizes it, or that she's known as I think her website is Web3 is going great, where she just talks about how it's clearly not going great. But yeah, important things to keep in mind. She suggested that there was yet another parallel between crypto advocates and the MAGA coalition, namely a desire to become the powerful institutions they claim to despise. Bitcoin, and to some degree other crypto assets, have this anti-government, anti-censorship ethos, she told me. Interesting that you'd be against censorship. I guess you're against censorship when it's something that you disagree with. The original crypto ideology, White said, was built around the notion that large financial institutions and the government shouldn't be part of this new paradigm. True, to a degree, true. It's something I agree with. But many crypto advocates have established a great deal of power through the wealth they've managed to accumulate using these assets. And over time, there's been a shift from we don't want those institutions to have the power to we want the power. I'd push back, and I'd say that the people who right now are pushing to be powerful have always wanted to be powerful. They just climbed on the back of this narrative, and they found that this could be a ride up the ladder. White argues that the crypto industry has become a recreation of much of what its original ideology claimed to despise. If you look at Coinbase and other crypto companies, they do similar things to financial institutions that Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin's pseudonymous creator, was disappointed in. And a lot of these companies work closely with the government too, and they do things like the same type of ID verification that banks do, she said. They've recreated the financial system, but with fewer protections from consumers. So this is something, I'm going to stop here, because this is like, Satoshi had nothing to do with the companies that were built on top. The companies that were built on top, whether Brian Armstrong and them ever said that they were against these financial institutions, that's a different game. But she's mixing and matching and meshing and combining and just throwing everything. She's making this intellectual salad, because you're complaining against the financial institutions that are building around it to make a case against Bitcoin and against the technology behind cryptocurrencies. And that's comparing apples to this pencil. So yeah, these kind of stuff irk me, because it's why don't you just maintain, you can be against Bitcoin, that's fine. Be against cryptocurrency, that's fine. Be against Coinbase, whatever you want. But at least be sound and when you argue about it. Or just along the same line. It seems clear that in a second Trump administration, the crypto industry and its Bairds might get their wishes. It's possible that the industry could see regulations declaring tokens as commodities instead of securities, which would ease restrictions on trading and perhaps lead to a more commingling between big banks and crypto assets. Last week, Trump nominated Paul Atkins, a former SEC commissioner, a pro-crypto voice, to run the SEC. Mind you, there are fierce critics of Paul Atkins that think he could be a good SEC commissioner. Just saying. The announcement caused the price of Bitcoin to surge more than 100,000. At the same time last year, the price was less than half that. You don't have to be a cynic to see a flywheel effect. Crypto has become a meaningful political constituency, but not because its technology has broad, undeniable utility, but because it has made certain people extremely wealthy, which has attracted a great deal of attention and interest. The industry courts politicians with its wealth, and politicians pander for donations by making promises. Ultimately, the crypto candidate wins, and the price of Bitcoin surges, making many of these same people richer and thus able to exert more influence. I don't even know what to dissect there, because, yes, crypto has become a meaningful political constituency, but maybe that's because the institutions that exist in the US that people want to see come down or remade and have pushed people to crypto. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people that are in crypto to get rich, but then there's a lot of people that are in crypto because of the ideology and what it represents. So to deny that because it's made people extremely wealthy, and it's denying the underlying. It's denying what's actually useful here, even though there are rich people who are exerting a bunch of influence because of the crypto industry. But to deny the whole utility and everything around it is short-sighted, to say the least. Trump hasn't taken office yet, but you can see already how this might play out. Justin Sun, a Chinese national cryptocurrency entrepreneur charged with fraud by the SEC, recently bought $30 million worth of tokens of Trump's World Liberty Financial Token, an arrangement that may have been quite lucrative for Trump, raising concerns that the incoming president's crypto investment will be an easy vehicle for bribery. There's speculation that Trump could make good on a proposal to create a strategic reserve of Bitcoins in the U.S., which could involve the federal government's buying 200,000 Bitcoins a year over the next 5 years, perhaps by using the country's gold reserves. That was an idea pushed forward by Saylor. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. For large crypto holders, this would be an incredible scheme, a wealth transfer from the government to crypto whales. In practice, this would allow crypto holders to sell off their assets to the government while pumping the price of the asset. Using the government to prop up Bitcoin is an interesting maneuver for a technology whose origins lie in decentralization. See, here again, he lets understood, or it's pretty telling that he doesn't truly understand or doesn't agree with Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't propped up by the U.S. government. The price of Bitcoin might be pushed up by the influence of Trump or by the more sound regulation. Like, there's a lot of things that he forgets, which is that apparently, or they say, one of the things that people are bullish about for crypto with Trump is that he's going to pass regulation that might be a little bit more clear for the crypto industry. Whether that's going to happen, it's a different story. But he's complaining about the lack of consumer protection when there's a lot of people that are banking that he's going to create a clearer playing field for what's going to happen. Whether that's going to happen or not, that's a different story, but that's what he's saying, or that's what's allegedly going to happen. Now, I know that a lot of you listening are probably going to be like, does this guy trust Trump to create something with safety nets for consumers and things like that? I mean, no, but it'll be better than the previous administration who denied the existence of this thing and didn't even say what could or couldn't be done. I'm not saying that Operation Choke Point 2.0 was a thing, but like, there was a concerted effort to not offer any sort of guidelines. So there's that. Crypto could also end up being the currency of choice for greasing the skids of the second Trump administration, but the broader concern is about what happens if crypto executives get everything they want. As my colleague Annie Lowry wrote recently, industry-friendly rules would lead to a flood of cash entering the crypto markets, enriching anyone with assets already in their wallets, but also increasing volatility and exposing millions more Americans to scams, frauds, and swindles. This is a point that I know Andreas Antonopoulos again has pointed out. One of the great things about crypto is that it opened the potential for people to make money in a so-called financial system without having to go through the immense loops and hurdles of bureaucratic process to prove you're accredited. Meanwhile, in the traditional financial space, only accredited investors can be able to play in that playground. But guess what? When things go bad, as a bubble has happened in 2008 and 2009, or in gold, or in housing, or in precious metals, or anything, guess what? The aftermath, everybody pays for it. But the reward only goes to accredited investors and Wall Street and these big financial mammoths. So crypto at least gives the option. Sure, it's volatile and it's risky and it's full of fraud and scams and things like that, but it's an option for people to access a financial system that could help them make some money. Does there need to be better protection? Sure. How would they look? I don't fucking know. That's not my job. Although I guess it's my job to think about it a little bit. But the idea here is for it to at least offer an option. And so to deny that, saying, exposing millions more Americans to scams, frauds, and swindles, well, they're already exposed to all of that in the traditional financial sector without the opportunity of participating in that system. At least crypto is giving you the chance of participating in that system. So, yeah, White offered a similar concern. Should crypto end up further entangled in the global economy? The collapse of FTX wiped out some of the exchange's users, but there was no real contagion for the broader financial system. Back then, crypto companies weren't too big to fail, and there was no need for a bailout, she told me. If banks are allowed to get more involved and if crypto and traditional finance aren't enmeshed, my fear is the industry will go bigger and the crashes will be greater. Crypto's future is uncertain, but its legacy, at least in the short term, seems clearer than it did before November 5th. Turns out that cryptocurrencies do have a very concrete use case. Here we go. They are the technology that has latched onto and then helped build a culture that celebrates greed and speculation as virtues just as it embraces volatility. The only thing predictable about crypto seems to be its penchant for attracting and enriching a patchwork of individuals with qualities including, but not limited to, an appetite for risk, an overwhelming optimism about the benefits of technology, or a healthy distrust of institutions. I mean, if you don't have distrust of institutions at some level, like, there's something wrong with you. Like, do you actually believe that the government is always telling you the truth, or is always doing things in your favor, or is all... I'm not like going on like a libertarian or an anarchist rant here. I'm just saying, like, do you actually believe that they're always telling you the things that, number one, they should be telling you, and then wink, wink, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden. Number two, yeah, how often do you, for example, sometimes lie or say things that aren't entirely true to somebody for any reason, let alone one that you want to cover up? So yeah, in these ways, crypto is a perfect fit for the turbulence and distrust of the 2020s, as well as the nihilism and corruption of the Trump era. What a fucking piece. Where do I start? I mean, I don't really have to start anywhere, and I think I've said a lot in between. This is just a classic FUD piece, which is frustrating because, like, if this was well-balanced, he would have pushed in things from people from the Human Rights Foundation that are doing stuff. There's Geyser Fund that's doing stuff. There's people in the Lightning Network. There's Albi that's doing stuff to, for example, that you could do all sorts of like online payments and use Bitcoin and the Lightning Network interacting with the internet, and there's not necessarily that's using it as an actual payment. What about on-chain lending with USDC or USDT? These are things that are interesting and that are getting used. So why all he did is push out, and it's not surprising really because of the Atlantic skew, but like all this does is sort of dampen a little bit the traditional media industrial complex, because people look at this and they think to themselves, all right, crypto is all terrible. It's all right-wing. It's all frauds and scams and rich people just wanting to get rich. Like, I'm not rich, nor am I right-wing. And I don't necessarily want to get rich. I mean, want to give me money, or if I want to, or if I do make a lot of money, so be it. But like me, all of this doesn't apply to a bunch of probably people that are listening in. Probably a lot of you have pretty sound ideas. Shout out, for example, to Molly Jane, who wrote about single issue voters. Like, there's a lot of people who have a very diverse ideas that are happening that Charlie leaves out of his piece because he's clearly pushing, I'm not going to say an agenda necessarily, but his biases. So yeah, I still thought it was interesting. I think it was more interesting to I think it was interesting, and I'm going to continue like dissecting these sort of hit pieces because I think it's worth it. Because otherwise you got to fight the FUD, you know? Is that Public Enemy, Fight the Power? I hope so. Otherwise, I just made another fool of myself. But yeah, you read it with me now, so I'm not going to say recommended rating. I still think that Charlie is a brilliant writer, so he writes well. But the ideas behind this are a little bit murky, let's say, or fragile. I'm gonna say, just like the crypto industry that he so valiantly tries to tear down. His piece is quite fragile and full of holes. But yeah, that was the end of the experiment. I hope you liked it. I'm sorry I made mistakes when I was reading. It's a lengthy piece. We don't read very often, or at least I don't, out loud. And I write for a living. So it's not that easy. There's a recommendation. Maybe you could give it a try and give it a read. See. So yeah, remember, subscribe, like this, turn on the notifications, and comment. Horrible. This is great. This is cool. This is the piece that I'm thinking of. This is an interesting trend that I'm looking at, or that you're looking at. Maybe you should bring this person on. Yeah, go for it. That's all that matters. So yeah, I'll catch you next week for the next episode. Read you later.